full weight of the government brought down on him in the greatest example of injustice I have seen in my career. Objection, Carol said. This is not argument, but counsel testifying herself. She wanted to interrupt me like I had to her. Overruled. Continue, Ms. Gallagher. I kept my eyes on the jury the whole time. What evidence places Mr. Weaver at the home of Grant Schaefer? I waited a few seconds, making eye contact with each juror. None. That's right, the government cannot show that Mr. Weaver went there. They say that someone wearing a Letterman jacket was there, but how sure can we be that that was Troy? Plenty of people in this town own Letterman jackets. People like former football player Justin Cross. Did anyone see Troy there? No, they did not. Remember the witness at Lefty's, Caitlin Wynant? She was honest with you. All she could truthfully say was that she saw an older man in a Letterman jacket walk out of Lefty's toward his car. She couldn't say whether he drove away or went back inside. She couldn't even say that man was Troy Weaver. She just assumed it after seeing Mr. Weaver on TV, after he was wrongfully arrested. I liked to move a little when addressing a jury, but it was hard with the crutches. I took a step back, which was a mistake. I stumbled slightly, using my right crutch to steady myself. It was embarrassing. I sheepishly said to the jury, "Never go for a morning run in the middle of trial," which brought a few smiles. Good. At least some were still with me. So, there's no proof Mr. Weaver went to Grant Schaefer's home. Similarly, there's no proof that Mr. Weaver ever touched the murder weapon, let alone fired the fatal shot. Remember the testimony of Charlie Weaver? The government thought he was going to say he got the gun from his father, and held it up. In black marker, I had written, "Reasonable doubt." In a few minutes, the judge is going to give you instructions about how to decide this case. And the most important instruction tells you that to convict, you must believe Mr. Weaver is guilty beyond a reasonable doubt. The judge will tell you that reasonable doubt is doubt based on common sense and reason. It requires proof that an ordinary person would be willing to rely on in the most important of their affairs. I set the paper on my table and pegged my way back to them. Would you send Mr. Weaver to prison based on nothing more than a threat? Because that is all the concrete evidence the prosecutor has laid before you. Time for the big finish. I took a breath. Let me suggest that you follow the evidence. All of it. And apply your common sense and reason. That's why our jury system is so important. Because it takes power from individual government officials, I pointed at Carol, and gives it to citizens like yourself. Power to make the most important of decisions, whether someone is guilty and should lose their freedom or even their life. So, if you consider all the evidence, you must consider all those who made threats against Coach Schaefer, something which the prosecution has entirely failed to do. You need to consider another person in particular who made such threats. That person is Justin Cross. The coach picked on his girlfriend. The coach cut him from the football team. So Justin wrote an email threatening to F up the coach. The gray-haired lady in the back was furiously scribbling notes. Good. It was only 16 months ago, but in his testimony, Justin Cross claimed he couldn't remember much of anything, didn't he? I said it with as much snark as possible. And importantly, he couldn't remember the names of his friends he was supposedly with on the night of the murder. Unlike my client, Troy Weaver, he could not provide a single name of anyone who could corroborate his claim that he was elsewhere. That means he has no alibi whatsoever. I hobbled over to the bailiff, who had placed all the physical evidence out on a table in case we needed it during argument. I picked up the murder weapon. I had intended to carry it back to the jury, but that was impossible with the crutches. And now, the most important fact. I held up the gun and reminded them. State's Exhibit number 1 did not originally come from Troy Weaver's house, like the prosecutor told you in her opening statement. This murder weapon came from the garage of Justin Cross's grandfather. Common sense and reason suggest that it was placed there by the killer. I set the gun down and walked back to the jury. Who murdered Grant Schaefer? Was it Justin Cross? Was it one of the 30 people who are known to have made complaints against the coach? Was it a random act committed by a stranger? Because the government rushed its investigation, we cannot answer that question. At least right now. But you don't have to. You, the jury, have one job, and that is to decide whether there is such overwhelming evidence of my client's guilt. You had conducted a thorough investigation. Judge Blankenship cut me off. Hold it, ladies. He turned to me, a little anger in his voice. I am not going to reopen this case, and I am not going to delay jury instructions or deliberations. His expression softened slightly. But what I will do, Miss Gallagher, is once we have a verdict, if you still want to make a record, I will allow you to do so. I stared back at the judge, trying to understand the implications. He was saying, if Troy was found guilty, I could make a record for appellate purposes, stating why, under the law, I was entitled to reopen the case. It wouldn't change anything with this jury, but if we lost, it might help on appeal. It might get Troy a new trial. It wasn't ideal, but I would have to live with it. Carol and I went back to our tables, and the judge gave the jury their instructions for deliberation. When he defined reasonable doubt, several jurors looked at me. At least they were paying attention. It took almost 10 minutes to give the instructions, but they weren't that complicated. It was a one-count aggravated murder trial. Did Troy pull the trigger or not? That didn't mean the deliberations would be easy. 12 unique citizens all had to come to a unanimous agreement. It could take days. The bailiff led the jurors back to their deliberation room. He would order them lunch, and then they would decide Troy's fate. The judge said, "Counsel, we have your numbers. We will call when we have a verdict." He banged his gavel and said, "We're adjourned."